Anyone who follows my channel knows that I love Japanese-made 2D platformers. Since there are a finite number of them, I figured I at least knew of the existence of nearly all the console platformers. But a couple years ago, I realized that there was a huge treasure trove of 2D games on the PlayStation 1 that I knew nothing about, probably because they were released only in Japan and often pressed in small numbers. And my ensuing journey to play all of the 2D games on the PlayStation has come to be one of my fondest gaming memories. Some were great, some were mediocre, but it almost felt like discovering an entire new console. One of the games I saved until the very end of my list was a platformer called Kitchen Panic. The game was made by Panther Software, a company I had never heard of, nor had anyone else ever heard of, which is a pretty good indicator that it was established as a mere technicality, so they would have a name to put on the game. It sounds like something I would have come up with when I was 9. As with a lot of other Japan-only 2D PlayStation games, there wasn't a lot of information about it online. There was one playthrough on YouTube, but the commentary was in Portuguese, and the player was clearly jumping back to save states frequently, which makes it hard to get a grasp of what the gameplay would really feel like. The only thing it did tell me was that it was a game with a potato as the main character running through a kitchen. Checking the usual shops and sites revealed it wasn't a common game, but not expensive either, usually no more than $30, so obviously people weren't desperate to get a hold of it. Taking all that into consideration, I figured, who knows, it's probably a game for little kids or something. It can't hurt to give it a try. Can't hurt to give it a try. It's the hardest game I've ever played in my entire life. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating for the sake of making a video. Kitchen Panic is far, far and away the hardest 2D platformer the world has ever seen. Castlevania, Ninja Gaiden, and Street Fighter 2010 are child's play in comparison. If Kitchen Panic was an 8.0 earthquake, those games wouldn't even register on the Richter scale. So let's look at just what's going on with this game. Kitchen Panic looks like a pretty standard 2D platformer. Your character is indeed a potato with arms and legs. You're in some kind of massive industrial kitchen and move from left to right while avoiding evil cans of food and other things that could come to life in a kitchen. As it turns out, there's way more going on. First of all, you have 3 different types of super jumps to be mastered. If you press up on the D-pad during a jump and jump again after you hit the ground, you'll do a high jump. If you press down on the D-pad during a jump and jump again after landing, you'll do a super jump forward. And if you press down on the D-pad during a jump and connect with a wall, you can do a high jump off the wall. This wall jump can be done after a super jump as well, and as many times as you like, so it's a huge key to the game. The really important thing is that you have to start pressing down before you touch the wall. If you press down when you've already connected with the wall, you'll just fall straight down as if you were preparing to do a super jump forward, often to your death. You can also run fast by holding the square button, and if you duck while running, your character will dive into a face-first slide along the floor. That's a lot of technique for one little potato. Also, enemies can't be killed in this game. They can only be stunned by hopping on top of them. You can't pass through them, you can't do a high jump off them. They'll be in your way till the bitter end. In fact, the rebound when you jump off an enemy feels very unstable. It's really hard to control where you land when coming off an enemy. But there are a few spots in the game where you'll need to push a stunned enemy onto a different platform, so they do have a purpose. The game features 6 worlds with 5 levels each, and a boss awaits you at the end of the 5th level in each world. Again, you can't really attack, so the boss fights are generally spent trying to figure out just how the boss takes damage. All of that is more or less standard fare for a 2D action game, so you're probably wondering just what is it that makes Kitchen Panic so difficult? It is not in unresponsive control or poor level design. The challenge is to be found in the special items you have to collect in every level. Specifically, pots of stew. Naysayers will suggest that they could just as well be soup or even curry, but I am going to be very adamant that the creators of Kitchen Panic intended for these magical pots of frustrating insanity to be filled with stew. But there is one thing that we know for sure. They include special sauce. It says so right here in the instructions. Most levels in Kitchen Panic can be beaten quite easily if a player were to simply walk to the right and head for the goal. But the real game is in completing the levels with 100%, and to do so you must collect 10 pots of stew within the stage. Not 3, not 8, 10. That is a huge number of collectibles for any game, let alone a 2D platformer on the PlayStation 1 that almost no one has ever heard of. And, you guessed it, the pots are consistently placed in out-of-reach, hard-to-get-to areas. Of course, you have to get all 10 in one shot. There are 9 silver pots and 1 gold pot in each level, and the gold pot also gives you an extra life. Sometimes gold pots are placed shortly after a checkpoint, probably where the developers realized that this section was just way too hard to complete on your first try, functionally giving the player unlimited tries if their patience holds. But generally, you're gonna have to do this all within 4 or 5 lives. And friends, your patience will be tested, because around halfway through the game, the stages in Kitchen Panic become never-ending corridors of drop-offs and single-hit death spikes. Would you like to see some examples of the outrageous feats of skill that Kitchen Panic asks of the player? Certainly. The third world takes place in the freezer, which means the floors are slippery, and your character's movement is already a little slippery to begin with. In one level, the very first pot is located on a platform that you have to use a super jump forward to fall through a small hole in the platforms at a perfect angle, and also not slip straight off the platform once you've got the angle down. This is a very high level move, and there are still 9 pots to go. Another level requires you to walk along moving cans of pepper, over spikes, while jumping over a huge spiked contraption that moves back and forth, just to get 1 pot. You can't use the super jump in this case because the ceiling is low, so one wrong move on the way there or the way back will almost certainly spell instant death. If it were toward the end of the last level in the world, I could kind of understand, but this is one small task within a much larger level. No big deal, you say? Try this. The 5th level in World 4 requires you to do a super jump forward to get into this tiny little opening in the wall just off screen to get 1 pot. Of course, directly below is a drop-off. You've got 1 chance per life. This requires both superb skill and a damn miracle. And once you get it, the hard stuff isn't anywhere near over. Then you have to cross these tiny platforms with enemies standing on them. Remember, you can't kill enemies. They only get stunned when you jump on them, and the rebound off an enemy is very hard to control. It's lunacy. Think it's over? Nope. Then you have to do a jump up to the next platform just high enough, but not too high, or you'll get tossed by a spring straight into the broken glass below. Again, you have to do a super jump forward, but make sure you land on the edge of the platform because there are also springs waiting for you on that side if you take 1 step too far. Can you do all this within 5 lives? I could go on and on about the outrageous situations this game presents you multiple times in every level. There are plenty of 8-bit titles that are known as some of the hardest games ever, but most of those have 1 or 2 notoriously hard sections. Kitchen Panic has well over 100. I haven't even shown you the last world. Who was the target audience of this game? I mean, the graphics are fine, but they're totally uninspired. It looks like it should have been a Super Nintendo game. The soundtrack is pure elevator music. It sounds like they bought the cheapest tracks they could find from some royalty-free website. Why is the level design so damn hard? Panther Software must have been comprised of the greatest gamers of all time. Apparently, they thought they were making this game for God himself to play. I said each world has 5 levels, but the more observant viewers may have noticed that it looked like there were 6 places to go into in each world. This is true. If you can somehow manage to collect all 10 pots in each of the 5 standard levels in that world, it opens up a special level. So there are technically 6 levels in each world. Remember everything I just told you about Kitchen Panic being difficult? Forget it. Throw it all away. Why? Because the special levels are exponentially harder than the normal levels. You think I'm fucking around? Look at this. This is the special level of World 4. The very first thing you must do is make a perfect super jump into this tiny crevice to get the first pot, and another one back out. Then, to get onto the very first platform, you have to do a wall jump and release the button at the exact perfect moment because there's broken glass overhead. There's just enough space for one potato. Then, you'll pick up a special item that allows you to float in the air for a few seconds by pressing the jump button a second time. You have just enough space to get a run started so you can dive underneath the shards of glass, and as soon as you fall off the edge, you have to activate the float item and get onto this platform with the pot. Then, you have to float between these 2 spiked objects moving up and down. Do a wall jump off the opposite side, activate the float item again, float to the other side, and do a wall jump again with hardly any space to get to safe ground. That is the first 2.5 screens of the goddamn level! And yes, it's just as long as a standard level, and yes, it gets much, much harder in the second half. It is absolute, pure insanity! If the standard levels in Kitchen Panic were made for God, then the special levels were made for Satan. This game is the proof that the devil exists. Take a look. This is my save file. You can see for yourselves. I've done it. I've completed every single level with all 10 pots. 100%. Yes, even the special levels. It can be done. I've beaten Kitchen Panic, but I can't say that it was worth it. I've done permanent damage to myself. I've changed. I've thought things that can't be unthought, and said things that can't be unsaid. I've wished death upon people's entire families. Kitchen Panic seriously messed up something inside of me, and I don't know if it can be fixed. You think you're tough? You think you're good at video games? I dare you. I dare you to get a physical copy of Kitchen Panic and play it through on real hardware. But I just hope that you have someone in your life who can be there to pick up the pieces of your soul when it's all over.